Well, folks, welcome to the Noble Man Podcast. I'm excited to have as our guest today, Dan Smith. He's a brother that I met about a couple of months ago for the first time, and then he was reacquainted with the Noble Warriors Ministry at the Homeschool Conference in Virginia just a few weeks ago, and leads a ministry called Voyage Rites. So, Dan, welcome to the Noble Warriors Podcast. Tell us about yourself and your ministry.
Mike, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to see you again. It's awesome that we're able to connect. I love what you've been doing with Noble Warriors. It's incredible. The fact that you've been doing this for near on 20 years now is awesome. Yeah. It's a testament to your faith. Voyage Rites for me is my step out into faith and to trusting God with what He's doing with my life and with my family's life. It's been an incredible journey for me, and it goes back to just a couple years. So I am fresh in on this. I have 3 sons. They are pretty young. My oldest will be turning 9 next week, which is crazy to think about. My middle son is 7 and my youngest is 3. And for a while I was working with the FBI and traveling a bit. And I came to realize that my presence at home was sorely missed and much needed. So being a present father was something on the forefront of my mind. And this was at the end of 2022. And I realized that I needed something to sort of push me and help me become a better father, a better husband, better leader. And I was born and raised in the church and had been going to church for a long time. And the church that I was going to did not have a men's group. So I looked to outside sources and an amazing opportunity came up to be one of the first classes in an organization called Apogee for online men's mentorship. And the challenges that I had completed through those 12 months completely changed my life. And two things that changed my mindset. One was I wanted to be intentional as a father. So one of the challenges to define a chief definite aim for the year. What's the number one most important thing to accomplish by the end of the year to move the needle the most in your life? So I knew I wanted it to be about fatherhood, and I had heard of the idea of rites of passage. So I decided, okay, I want my boys to experience something like that when they are of age. So I made it my chief definite aim to design something for my boys. And started digging into the research and started realizing, man, I really could have used something like this as a teenager. I grew up in the faith, as I said. My grandfather was an Assemblies of God pastor, and it was a great experience as a young kid. But then in my teenage years, I sort of drifted away from my family and my faith. Never denied my faith, but questioned a lot of things, and it was a very dark time in my life. And looking back, I think I really could have used something like this. But the information has not been widely disseminated, widely known about rites of passage, in my opinion, in the broader church, the capital C church. So I think my dad sort of lacked the resources that he could have needed. He was a great dad to this day. He's been married to my mom for going on 37 years, and he's worked really hard to provide for my family. But he also didn't know what he didn't know. And there are some tools like a rite of passage that I think he really could have used to my benefit, and maybe the church could have stepped in and provided him that information and knowledge as well. So I'll circle back around to that when it comes to Voyage Rites. But I experienced this dark time in my life, so I really think that I could have used a rite of passage. Fortunately, through no will of my own, God came back into my life in a very powerful way. Completely changed everything with my mindset and led me on the path of law enforcement, where I spent 14 years. So with all that being said, the second thing that Apogee did for me was change my mindset. And my mindset was changed from a W-2 mindset to more of a sovereignty-based mindset, where I realized I've been working all these years for the government, slaving away for an organization that it really is just going to replace me the day that I leave. And really, ultimately, in my life, my personal life, and in the lives of those that matter to me, is meaningless. So I really wanted to be more purposeful, more fulfilled in my life. And then it struck me one night at the dinner table that, man, I could be helping fathers build out rites of passage, getting as many boys as we can through a rite of passage experience and really provide them with what they need. And it it immediately clicked, and I felt a fire inside of me that I never felt for law enforcement. And I knew in that moment that this is what I needed to be doing with my life. So that sort of led to a bit of a journey in and of itself to leave law enforcement. And I was working in New York City and commuting from New Jersey. And I ended up getting a transfer down to the Quantico area in Virginia, which is where I'm at now. And then this year, by the grace of God and the current administration offering a deferred resignation opportunity, I knew that this was my chance. This was my opportunity to fully commit in faith in what God's been doing in my life, and to fully trust Him with my life circumstances, my finances, my family, and to just put it all at His feet and say, this is the mission that you want me on, so I'm going to commit to it. So wow. It's been an incredible journey. And there's a lot more that goes into everything that I just said. That was sort of the 1,000-foot view. Yeah. But it was it continues to be incredible, and I really enjoy helping out fathers. I really enjoy seeing the impact a rite of passage has on a boy, and I've met many young men who have experienced a rite of passage from their father. Now that I'm sort of getting into this space, I'm meeting these guys, and every time it's the same story. Like, man, that was the best thing I could have had at that age. And they continue to look back on it, realizing like how powerful it was and how much it shaped their direction and their mental clarity for their future as a man. So it's so reaffirming to me that it is much needed.
Yeah. So you're using a term, rites of passage, that I'm familiar with, and some of our listeners may be, but others may not. So give a quick definition of what you mean when you say rites of passage. What is that, and how does that tie back into a spiritual journey? Because we're followers of Jesus Christ, and we want to see our children follow Christ. So how does this tie into a spiritual journey? What does that look like? Help us with some core definitions and perspective here.
Yeah, absolutely. So a rite of passage is, at its very base, is a sort of a ritualistic ceremony, and it's meant to codify in the memory a significant moment of transition from one time of your life into another. Mm-hmm. So a marriage ceremony, technically, it's kind of a rite of passage. Giving birth for a woman is a rite of passage. Society has taken this concept of rite of passage, and culture has sort of twisted it. And boys sort of look for ways to put themselves through a trial or to achieve something where they can have verification in their mind that they are a man now. And all this is coming from the world and society and culture, like getting your first driver's license, getting drunk for the first time, having sex for the first time. Boys are seeking these kinds of things out. I felt it in my life when I was that age, that post-puberty adolescent age, where they've gone through a physical transformation, but they don't really have a complete grasp of understanding what it means to be a man. Women have a very firm mental clarity once they go through puberty. Like, there is without a doubt that they can bear a child and that they are now a woman. Men do not have that. So we need, and cultures around the world and tribes have realized this for thousands of years, that the boys need something, or else they're going to burn the village down just to watch it burn. So they really need that kind of direction. And that's when the elders and the men and the fathers would come in and provide them this direction through a rite of passage experience. And it's something that's been lost in our culture and in our society. And when it ties into our spiritual journey, there's a couple passages I key in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And first, it's in 1 Samuel, when King David is anointed by Samuel. He is moving out of his boyhood phase into and beginning his masculine journey. John Eldredge in Wild at Heart talks a lot about the masculine journey and how important that is for us as men to be focused on, to go through. Just a few verses later in 1 Samuel, King David, or at the time just David, comes into Saul's service. And there's a powerful verse where it talks about what type of man King David is. Or I keep saying King David. What type of person he is. And he's a man of valor. He's a man of faith. He's a man after the Lord's heart. And I key in on that verse because there's a lot that happened in between there. So he goes from being anointed, and he has to go several years before he becomes the man that he needs to be, before God works in his life to then come to the king's service. And I believe that that's the masculine journey we all need to go through as men, where we need to focus on ourselves, our own personal development, these key areas of what it means to be a man, to protect and to provide and to lead. And then when the Lord deems us ready, he will bless us by moving us along on our masculine journey into, John Eldredge calls it the king phase, where you have your kingdom, you find a spouse, you get married, you have kids, and you pour into the next generation. So all of that is encompassing of the masculine journey. So then the second part of scripture that I turn to is when he goes into the temple and leaves his family behind. And his mother is very distraught. Mary's very distraught when she finds him. So that is key to me, because women and mothers specifically, they really want to hold their boys tight. And I think we've seen a lot of negative impacts from that in our society, where unfortunately there's a reality where we have a lot of single mothers and raising boys, and they're doing the best that they can, but they want to hold on tight to their boys, even to the point where they've grown up into what they're supposed to be men at this point, but the mothers are still holding on. So John Tyson, in his book, The Intentional Father, talks about how a mother's role, and this is proven in thousands of years of rites of passage, the mother's role is to point their son in the direction that they need to be. And that's towards a male mentor, towards their father. So it's one of the toughest things a mother can do, but it's very critical for the boy to have that in his life, to have that direction, and for the mother to continually point him in the direction that he needs to be, because with his boyhood mentality, he's going to want to continue to turn to his mother, but he should be turning to his father. So we see that with Jesus. He knew to turn to his father. He needed to go seek the knowledge and lessons that he needed to learn and ask the questions he needed to ask to the elders in the temple. So that's where he went, that's where he needed to be. So we see that in Scripture, and it all ties into our spiritual journey as men and who God needs us to be and who he's ordained us to be.
Yeah. So a couple of things you said early on as you were talking about that becoming a man stage and phase there, where a young man needs to focus on himself, and then you mentioned setting up a kingdom. If we're not careful, it can sound like we're doing this from a self-serving perspective.
Right.
And I know that's not what you mean, but I want to give you an opportunity to kind of speak to that, because working on yourself in that scenario is learning what it means to not gratify myself, but to invest in others as an outward expression of what true manhood really looks like. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is that the way you would characterize that?
Absolutely. And the ultimate version of ourselves that we're trying to become is to become like Jesus. That is the apogee, the highest peak of the mountain that is unattainable in this life, but we are always striving to get there. And that's the process of sanctification. That's what we're called to be as Christians. So that masculine journey is serving others in a way that's going to fulfill that purpose. So in the rite of passages that I conduct and that I encourage fathers to do when they're planning their own rites of passage is to really reinforce the values of servant leadership and show the boys, like, your purpose is not to be self-gratifying and for your own self-edification, but is to serve others, is to protect others, provide for family, and to lead those in your community. So it can look several different ways in a rite of passage, but reinforcing those values is incredibly important, and I make sure that the fathers don't miss that. Yeah.
You know, so one of the things that comes to mind, Stacy and I also have 3 boys. We've been married. We just celebrated 33 years of marriage. Our oldest will turn 30 soon. Then our next son is 27, I think. Then we've got a 25-year-old, and we've got a daughter who will be 21 this year. And so I remember as they were boys, Stacy watching and saying, well, they're they're getting stronger. I don't want them to be stronger than I am or bigger than I am and all that stuff. And there were multiple times when I had to say to Stacy, sweetheart, we're not raising boys, we're raising men. And it was one of the things that I love to say to her is there will be a day when you need a man to stand beside you and I will not be available. But one of these boys will be available, hopefully, to stand beside you and care for you and protect you and provide for you. And so we have to enter into this parenting thing, not with the idea that we're going to put a bumper sticker on the back of our car that says, I've got an honor roll student, but we need a longer vision that says, I'm not raising an honor roll student or an all-star pitcher. I'm raising a father. I'm raising a husband. And for our daughters, I'm raising a mother. I'm raising a wife. Yes. And so the work that we do early on in their lives sets the stage for this. So I'm all in on this. I would ask you, tell me about some of the research that you did, because you've mentioned Tyson already. There's some other guys out there that have written about this. And one of the things I like to do is recommend resources that folks could read and get the background that you've gotten. So what other than John Tyson did you read to kind of study and get your arms around this idea of rites of passage?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned Wild at Heart, John Eldredge, and The Intentional Father by John Tyson. Two phenomenal resources if you're really diving into the masculine journey and a rite of passage process that John Tyson likes to talk about, that he took his son through, which spanned the course of a very young age, 13 to 18. And then the resource that I've gone by a lot is Raising a Modern Day Knight by Robert Lewis. Yeah. And I know you've mentioned him quite a bit on your podcast, and you mentioned him when we first met at Choice Baptist Church. Right. And his resource has been amazing. This was the first book I read when it came to rites of passage, and I realized how true and accurate this has been. So I've also tried to expand my mind to other resources when it comes to male psychology. And it's been fascinating because if I go to a bookstore, there is no shelf that says male psychology. So it's been difficult to find sources, but I've come to discover that in the psychological world, the research has been quite extensive over the past 100 years or so, with the first source being a French guy who wrote a book on rites of passage in 1909 by Arnold van Gennep. So there's been a whole world of rite of passage literature and resources on initiation and male psychology versus female psychology and how it differentiates from each other. But I have found a lot of commonality where they continually say, in our Western culture, we really need to be initiating the boys into manhood, and we need some sort of process for them. And in my opinion, and in my observations, in my experience, I have not seen a commonality when it comes to rites of passage across our culture. There have been different organizations trying to pick it up, different resources like books, which have been great, but really, there hasn't been something that's really like taken a foothold in our culture and said, like, hey, we need rites of passage for our boys. I think that's just all part of the long-term play from the enemy on his attacks on men, through the results of feminism throughout the decades, and men listening to their inner voice that they need to be passive. So with all that being said, that's my mission, is to get rites of passage out to as many fathers and sons as I possibly can, bringing the fathers alongside their sons to initiate them into manhood, because it encourages the fathers to step into their calling as men, as fathers, and then it also provides the boys with what they need. And I understand that there's the reality in our world that there's a lot of single mothers, there's a lot of fathers that have failed in their role as a father. They're either not present or they're completely absent from the picture. So it's finding those good men too that can take on that mentor role, that male mentor role with the boy that they so desperately need, and being that voice that can guide them into manhood.
Yeah, let me go back to your comment about studying male psychology and that sort of thing. And I just want to reinforce that I love to find secular resources that affirm sacred truth. And so that's part of what I I enjoy doing as well. And I will affirm, it's interesting. I actually kept an article years ago from the chief of police in Richmond when he was talking about some of the vandalism and the fighting, the gang stuff that was going on. And he said, these are simply young men without direction. And so there's the need right there in front of you of what happens when we raise up these young men without direction. I want to speak about this personally as well, because my dad he invested in me. He did not have the training that I have and the background. And like you said, did what he knew to do, did the best that he could. But I remember questioning, am I a man? Have I got what it takes? Can I do it? And that rattles around in the head of every young guy. And so I remember in Boy Scouts, there was a particular initiation that I had to go through where I had to sleep by myself overnight with very little to provision, no food or anything. So it was a night in solitude by yourself. That was an incredible marker in my life. It was a testing point. It was essentially a rite of passage, but it wasn't a spiritual rite of passage. And then I remember the other thing that became part of a rite of passage for me was playing football in high school. I remember wondering, can I hit and be hit? Can I take it and get up? And can I do it? And so playing football was a rite of passage for me. When I went off to college, making the decision, am I going to go to church? Am I or not? Am I going to fit in with the crowd or am I going to stand out? And so that was another rite of passage. And so my reason for saying this is that young men are going to find ways to test and try themselves. And they're going to do that in the company of other knuckleheaded 15 and 17 and 18-year-olds.
Yes.
And so part of what you're doing is providing some guidance for dads to wisely and biblically guide their sons through this process so they've got someone to walk beside them. So, and I can talk more about this because my sons are older. I've done some of this with them. But tell us about your process, the rites of passage experiences that you've created and you've mapped out to help guys with some of this. What does that look like?
Well, it looks like experiential learning. And so you craft different evolutions throughout the day to really reinforce different values that you want to instill in your son. And I do that as a group in the in-person events, but a father can do specifically what he wants if he's crafting a rite of passage for himself or for his son. So in my day, we reinforce different values like leadership and working with your father, looking to your father for advice, being able to be open and honest to share with your father, but also the other male mentors that are there, the other fathers. One of the things I love that's so simple, and this is again has a history within the rites of passage for thousands of years, are just simple walk and talks. And we get in two single file lines, and it always occurs right after an evolution. So they're processing what they just experienced, what they just learned, and now they have an opportunity to share it with one of the other fathers as we walk and we talk. And I believe, in my experience with men, and I co-lead a men's group at my church, is that we learn so much better when we're shoulder to shoulder rather than face to face. So being able to walk in a direction and being able to share what they just learned with another adult male really helps them realize that, hey, it's okay to talk about like things that I'm not so sure about. Like, hey, this is what I experienced. I think it means this. I think it means that. And then they have the opportunity to switch. So by the end of the day, they've talked to all the men. They've shared with their father multiple times. And it ends up being a very, very powerful thing. And that's feedback that I've gotten from the fathers and from the sons, is that one of the best parts about the entire day is the walk and talks, because they have that opportunity to share and to speak. And there's no phones in front of them and stuff like that. So that's really good. So then there's other evolutions throughout the day. So we're talking about servant leadership, talking about core values. We're talking about understanding death, which is a concept that boys really find hard to grasp. I find that boys aren't future oriented. They're very present oriented. So really trying to help them think about, like, hey, at one point, and in your life and in everybody's life, there comes a point where you're going to die. So we actually take them to a cemetery and we ask them to contemplate and to write their own eulogy. Like, what would happen if we all got into the car to head back to the event center and we got hit by an 18-wheeler? And what would be the last things you would want your family members to know? So write your own eulogy, write a letter to, pick one person to write a letter to. This is your last letter. So those are very, very powerful exercises. The fathers get a lot out of those too. So then we get, so that's just the experiential learning. We haven't even gotten to the rite of passage yet. The rite of passage is more so towards the end of the day. And based off of the literature, it includes three main components: separation, initiation, and then reincorporation. So the separation component, one starts with the mother directing the son towards the father before the day, or at the beginning of the day before they arrive. But then within the day's structure, we separate them from the day into a sacred space. And it's very simple to construct a sacred space. There's a great book by a guy, or father and son, by David and Stephen Arms, called Milestone to Manhood. A Catholic family that has been doing rites of passage for the boys in their and the girls in their family for several generations now. And it was really cool to hear how they simply would rent an Airbnb, and then to make the sacred space, they would just take off their shoes at the front door, and then they would enter into the house barefoot. And at the end, when everything was done and complete, to be reincorporated back into the world, they would put their shoes back on. And sometimes it's as simple as that. I mean, you could get elaborate, and I don't like to get crazy woo-woo or anything like that. But a simple gesture like that can actually have deep meaning. So we go from separation into sacred space, where the initiation can occur. And this is a carefully crafted, powerful moment where the father has the opportunity to affirm to his son that he is a man now. And then we go through the initiation and we come out of sacred space. One, that's the reincorporation back into the real world. But then when they get back home, their family should be treating them differently, recognizing them that they are no longer a boy, but they are a man now. And that could mean dropping childish nicknames. It can mean additional responsibilities that were completely unheard of for the boy in the family, but now that he's a man, he can take these things on. So all of those, that structure of separation, initiation, and incorporation is repeated in a grander way on the outside of the rite of passage, but also within the rite of passage.
Yeah. Well, and so this is a one-day experience that you kind of walk fathers and sons through, correct? Yeah, so I have a one-day event that I do, but it could look like any number of things. If a father wanted to take his son out for a week, on a week-long trip, or a few days, it could definitely be done like that. Yeah. But there does need to be a significant moment within that time of initiation, hey, you're now a man now. You have that powerful moment that he'll never forget. And so I would just say to the dads that you read some of these accounts, like John Tyson, I love what he did, but my goodness, not many folks are going to have the resources to pull it off at the level that John Tyson did with some of the experiences with his sons. And so it doesn't have to be super expensive or super elaborate. Right. It can be very simple. And the key is actually in the title of Tyson's book. It's The Intentional Father. It's, will you be intentional? Will you set aside the time and the energy and the thought to actually do this in the life of your son? Will you give him this gift? And that's a big deal. Yes. I'll just tell you, our sons are older, and so a little bit about what we did. I read Raising a Modern Day Knight, and before our kids went into middle school, I took them on a camping trip, stayed at a friend's cabin, and did some things with them. Gave them a set of dog tags. Each of my sons got a set of dog tags with Romans 12:2 on it, because they're getting ready to go into middle school where peer pressure is going to be crazy. So do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So we memorized that verse together. So that was transition from elementary school to middle school. Then before starting high school, I went with my kids on a mission trip and had a great experience there. Then there was a special send-off as they left home to go into college. And at that point, I gave each of my sons a Bible with quotes in it from some of their friends and some mentors in their lives. And then two of my sons have gotten married. And so the final experience has been kind of commissioning them as husbands. And so
that's awesome.
So we've had markers along the way in our family that have been relatively simple but impactful.
Yes.
And so that's a real key. And inviting other
huge.
men. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's huge. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't have to pay a bunch of money to go to this huge event where you might get beat up, you might not, and then come out of it and like, hey, you had a good time, but that was it. It can be very, very simple. I don't recommend doing it within the confines of your own home because you want to create a memorable moment, and doing that in an unknown place, a new place will lend to that. But hey, if you have to do it in your home, it's okay. It's not like it. It's like you said, being intentional from a young age to an older age. I love to start like you did at a younger age, where you're sort of laying the foundation for what's to come. Like you're laying expectations. This is my role as your father. You still have time left as a child, but you're going to transition to manhood one day, and I'm going to be the voice of reason that's going to get you there. So that's awesome. But yeah, just keep it simple. But what matters most is being intentional.
Right. You know, I would say another thing that I pick up on with your walks is the idea of speaking to different fathers speaking to different sons. And one of the things that has been exciting is for us to watch our sons and our daughter feel comfortable around other adults. Mm-hmm. I got to tell you, it is a telling marker about the confidence of a young person if they are uncomfortable around adults. And so, guys, I would just say to you that this is one of the ways that you can help your sons and your daughters develop some level of confidence around adults is through this rites of passage type experience where you give them exposure to other adults. And I would also say that we have prayed that our sons and daughter would find other adults who would say the same things to us that we will say to them, but with a different voice, because they listen to other people differently than they listen to us sometimes. That's just that's like parenting 101. And so it is a gift for you to give to your children safe relationships with other wise adults that they can rely on and speak to at a time when they don't feel like they can speak to you. So that's part of this rites of passage experience.
Yeah, and that's another area where I reflect on as a kid growing up in the church. And I remember as a teenager sort of looking towards other adult men and sort of observing them and their patterns, and wondering if they would notice me, if they would say anything to me, but then observing them to glance at me and continue walking. So one of the things I'm working on now, which I'm super excited about, I did this last year in the fall at my church, is a small group for fathers and for sons to come together. And it doesn't have to culminate in a rite of passage. We did an awesome rite of passage for the boys, but it's really about bringing them together and learning about the different things the Bible says about masculinity, about our role to be a light in the darkness, and what does manhood mean, what does womanhood mean, but diving into these topics and giving the fathers an opportunity to expand on them more so after they leave, but bringing them together in a way that the boys can look to these other men and hear them speak and hear their wisdom, but also providing them the opportunity to have some fun together and to get to know these other fathers and these other boys their age, but in a group setting where they're doing things shoulder to shoulder, and they can have these male mentors going forward for the rest of their life. But hearing that other voice is so important. Sometimes we tune out our parents. I know I did. I tuned out my dad a lot. Sorry, Dad. But it reminds me of a story that I heard on a podcast a long time ago, and I've gone back to try to find it. I haven't been able to find it. But it was a powerful story where a father had an issue with his son. His son was going through something. He had no idea what it was. His son did not want to tell him what he was dealing with. But he knew his son looked to his football coach. So his football coach took him aside and had a conversation with him. And then the football coach then came to the father and said, hey, your son's going through something. He doesn't want me to tell you about it, but just understand that we're going to work through it. And I want you to trust me as we do this. And the father took a step back and said, okay. And his son was able to come out of whatever he was dealing with through the help of that other male trusted mentor. And then that was beneficial for all going forward. So one is the level of trust that a father needs to have in other men. That's goes back to building your community and those men that you trust in your circle. But it also it's so important to have those other male mentors in your son's life because there's a time where it could be the worst thing in the world, and it makes so much sense for them to come to you, but they just won't. So having those other men to be that resource could pay dividends down the line.
Well, and we need to look at that as being available to be a resource to our son's friends. And so that's been a beautiful part of mine and Stacy's experiences. We have deep relationships with some of the friends of our kids, and delight in seeing them and delight in hearing of their marriages and their kids. And, because they're older now. I'll give you a strategy, though, that I use several times, because when a younger person would confide in me that they were dealing with a particular issue that probably they didn't want to tell their parents about, I would say, okay, I'm going to give you 48 hours. I'm going to pray with you. I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to walk with you. But you've got 48 hours to share this with your parents, or I'm going to go and meet with them with you, and we're going to talk about it together. But I want to call you to the level of responsibility that it takes for you to lean into this by yourself. And so giving them a timeline gives them some space, but it also gives them a reminder that they need to lean into this. So so I've used that strategy a number of times. A couple more things. 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. And that's part of what we're doing here, is looking to see young men give up childish ways and abandon those. And I know from my personal experience as a guy and watching my sons, it doesn't happen like you're flipping a switch overnight. It's a process. And so I would say that in many ways, this is kind of like having the sex talk with your kids. There's an old school mentality that says, well, I've done that, I don't have to do that again. Well, no, these conversations are relentless and ongoing, and you never want to have a terminal conversation. You want to continue to invest in your kids and help them walk forward into manhood, and primarily what we're talking about, or womanhood. So we keep those doors of conversation open because that's valuable, and we've got to keep it going.
It is so true. And just as the verse says, like, the boys have to put away childish ways in order to become men. And I tell my boys this today, is that right now, as a boy, their mentality is selfish. But in order to be a man, their mentality has to shift to that of being responsible. So it correlates exactly with that verse and exactly with what you're saying. And it's so true that just walking alongside your son in that journey, using a rite of passage can provide it could be a stepping stone for you if you haven't lived up to your own definition of intentionality in your son's life to that point. It could be a powerful moment where you can reconnect and forge that bond, and then carry on forward from there, where you're walking alongside him in his masculine journey. And it could be part of yours too. Like one of the most powerful things that I've seen, and I underestimated this going into this line of work, is the impact it's had on the fathers. Like, the rite of passage is great for the boys, but the fathers got so much out of it. It was almost as if they were waiting for somebody to tell them, hey, it's okay to be intentional. It's okay to do these things for your son. Everything I asked them to do, I had them come up with a gift. Like you mentioned the dog tags, I have them come up with a gift for the ending. I have them write letters to their sons, and they did it, no hesitation, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park. They crushed it. And I would get messages after the event saying, "Hey, my son is just in his room reading the letters." Like it's so cool to hear stuff like that. But the father's got so much out of it too. So take that into consideration when you take on something like this for your son. Is that it's not just for your son, but it's for your own journey too.
Yeah, and I would go back to the story of Christ. I mean, you talked about the time when he stepped away from his family. He was at the temple when he was probably early teens or so. But there's also that moment where the transfiguration, where the Lord appears, and says in front of Christ and with Peter and James and John there, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased."
Yes.
I mean, that affirmation is priceless. And
it really
what you
is.
find when you start coaching men to affirm their sons is you find that many men have never been affirmed. And so they're looking for that sort of blessing. And if Christ, our Lord and Savior, was blessed by that affirmation from Father God, then don't we need it as well, and don't we need to share it with our own sons? So,
absolutely, man. Yes, yeah, and the fathers, if they can provide that moment to their son, they're going to see the impact it has, and that's going to be the affirmation for them too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Dan, I've enjoyed this, and I think it's going to be beneficial to some of our listeners. How can they find out about more about you and Voyage Rites and get connected with you if they'd like to follow up?
Yeah, so I'm happy to have conversations much like this with anybody.
Yeah.
So I've actually just revamped the website. So if anybody wants to go to voyagerites.com, they can easily book a call. We can just chat about what it means to do a rite of passage for your son. And then also I'm doing rites of passage in two different ways to try to get it out to fathers. One I've mentioned is the in-person events. We've got a few of those scheduled this year. If you're on the East Coast, check those out. The other resource is online resources. So I've got a couple downloads, fairly low price, where if your son is in the younger age range, sort of pre-puberty, you could do a rite of passage similar experience with your son, but setting that foundation. But then also if your son is old enough, if he's post-puberty, there's a resource for that too. You can craft and structure a rite of passage by using this as a guide. So those are all available online. I'm doing men's coaching now too with the Apogee program, which is phenomenal to get that off the ground. The Making Mighty Men small group curriculum, that's coming in the fall. Really, really excited about that. That's going to be a video-based curriculum, much like Better Man. I know you're a big fan of Better Man. I did that with my small group as well. But it's going to be video-based where the fathers and sons can get together and watch a short lesson and then have a great discussion. And there's some other things that's going to come with that too, but that's going to come in the fall. So it's all on the website. I'm on social media and all that good stuff.
All right, so voyagerites.com is the website, and I'm sure from there they could get to your social handles and all those other pieces, correct? Awesome.
Yep, that's it.
Well, Dan, again, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your story with us, and I pray that the Lord continues to pour out favor on you and use you as an instrument to accomplish this important work for the kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on.
All right. Sounds great. God bless you, friend. Thanks so much. Well, folks, that finishes up for the Noble Warriors podcast, the Noble Man podcast for this week. So I will say that we are moving into a 20th anniversary celebration, and we're going to have some special podcasts coming up with some friends and family, actually. I'm hoping to have my wife on as a podcast guest to talk about 20 years of our journey in ministry together. So I hope you'll look forward to that and tune in for the next episodes of the Noble Man podcast. God bless you.